All right, I'm going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Rzuski. I'm one of the information services librarians at the Library of the Health Sciences in Chicago. And what I'm hoping to do today is to be able to give you some ideas and some resources on how you can find research instruments. So this would be in situations when you would know the instrument's name. If you need an instrument for your research project, it could be schoolwork. If you're doing any projects over at the hospital. So it's hoping to give you some ideas today on how you can find research instruments and also getting information on those instruments too. So that's what I'm hoping to do today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and I will do my best to answer your question. I also wanted to just get a sense, and you can raise your hands or do a thumbs up. How many of you have actually tried to look for research instruments? Just so I can get an idea of, so I see a couple people raising their hands. Thumbs up. Okay, I see there's a few people here. Yeah, and I will say, oh good, thank you. And I will say it can be a frustrating experience. There's times when I'm very successful and I can find it, and there's times that it's hard to get the full text of those instruments. So I hear you on that if you've ever had to look for those kinds of things. And before I actually dive into getting into research instruments themselves in terms of searching, so what I'm referring to today is these could be questionnaires, scales, surveys, and all different kinds like checklists, things like that. So, and there's times when you can find valid ones, or sometimes you can't. But in terms of just a really quick overview, with reliability, it refers to the consistency with which a construct is measured across various contexts or populations. And then we have the validity of the instrument, which has to do with if it's actually measuring what is intended to measure. Now, you can find instruments out there. It's possible to find those, but then it gets a little more tricky when to see if they're actually validated. Because I do get questions, some will ask, oh, can I actually get a validated instrument on this particular topic? And I can sometimes find articles that have scales or questionnaires, but they might not be validated. So that can be a little tricky. So I just wanted to I can ground us for where I'm going today in terms of searching. And some questions that to ask yourself, and I got this from a source down there because I thought this was a nice chart here, or a screenshot, is before you actually start going around and looking for these, how much time do you actually have? Because not all instruments, you're going to be able to find them. And they're not all going to be freely available. Sometimes I've seen them cost like $15, $30. Sometimes it could be several hundred to maybe a couple $1,000s, especially if it's more of like an organizational license or something that you have to purchase in order to run the test. So that's another thing to consider, and what I just talked about, if they're reliable, valid, and then if the instrument, it might take you some time in order to get it, because let's say you contact somebody at another institution and they might take some time to get back to you on that. It might not get back to you right away and you're waiting for them to give you that permission. And this is something that when I was preparing for this, because it's been a few years since I taught a class like this, because what I was seeing there, it's very, very important that you obtain the owner's permission. I'll talk later on the presentation about some ideas about how to do that, especially if you are planning to publish it. So I'll give you some ideas later on about that, but it's something that over and over again was trying to get that permission, because there are some instruments that are like, hey, yes, you can use it, but there's times that you just can't just go right away and use them. So, but I'll be talking more about that a little bit later on. And in terms of finding the full text, some databases are going to automatically have the full text in them, some do not. The tests might be published in a journal article, it could be in a book chapter, because I remember a couple years ago I had to go find a test or particular instrument, and I found it all the way in like an appendix of an ebook online. It was this whole, I went on this adventure in order to find this. And you might also have to buy the test, which I mentioned. So I every time I get a question like this, I never know which direction it's going. I never know. Okay. So the databases that I'm going to start with today, like if I wanted to get information on an actual instrument that I want to use, there's probably some other ones out there, but these are the ones that actually will give you some information about the instruments. And the first one is CINAHL, which is a cumulative index of nursing and allied health literature. And CINAHL is a great resource. I use CINAHL all the time as a nursing liaison. I tend to use it a lot. And I will say that some of the resources I'm talking about today are health sciences. Some of them are more social sciences. And I might be more health sciences in my examples that I use. Just wanted to mention that if in case we have people who aren't from the health sciences. So CINAHL is a good place. There's also HaPI, which stands for Health and Psychosocial Instruments. And we actually have a database called HaPI Online, which is spelled the same acronym, Hispanic Americans Periodicals Index. So that's a completely different database. But HaPI, the Health and Psychosocial Instruments one, has over 15,000 measurement instruments. Now has information on them. Like it has information like if it's a questionnaire, if it's a scale, index measures, things like that. It goes all the way back to 1985. They have seen some older records in there. I will say with CINAHL in terms of the coverage, I think it goes back into the 30s, 1930s. Sometimes they've seen some older articles in there, but with HaPI, it's updated quarterly. So I have seen occasionally if it's through, because we get it through Ovid, I have seen some full text in there, but they don't automatically include the actual instrument. And then the last resource is the Mental Measurements Yearbook. And we have a version of it that has something called tests in print. And I remember years ago having to go into our book stacks and looking up, because we have them upstairs in the library, actually going and flipping through the volumes, looking through like both, the Mental Measurements Yearbook and the tests in print. I do remember looking through those, but now we have them online. And what Mental Measurements Yearbook, they're saying that this is the consumer reports of the testing industry. That is what they're calling themselves. And it's produced by the Burroughs Center for Testing at the University of Nebraska. And the database provides users with a comprehensive guide to over 3,000 tests dating back to 1938. They have to be in English, at least published in English, has to be commercially available, and it does include reviews. So and it also gives some really helpful and useful information that you're going to see in a few minutes as I go into these resources. So this, I wanted to just give you an overview before I start doing my searching. Okay. So I'm going to hopefully, and let me know if you can't see this, and please let me know if you have questions. You can put them in the chat box or wanted to ask about something as we're going along today. So I'm going to start with, scroll up here, my little cheat sheet that I have here so I can see where I want to go. So I'm going to go I'm on library.uic.edu. I'm going to the databases. This is probably the fastest way to get to our databases. And I can search, but I'm so used to scrolling. I'm going to go into CINAHL. And I'm on campus. Should be able to take me right in. I'll just make this a little bit too big this way. And in CINAHL, I'm going to actually look for a particular kind of a research instrument. So I can go here and I'm going to try this one. See if this is going to take me right there. Okay, so then it's giving me some information on the instruments, and you're going to see here on the left side of the page, when I click on research instruments, it's actually giving me information on the actual scale. So CINAHL has over 200 research instruments in it, or I should say information on the research instruments. So as I scroll down and take a look, what it's going to give me here are the variables that are measured, the sample population, the different methodologies that they're using for this particular scale, and also will tell you the type of instrument it is, how many questions, and where you can get this. They also will list some citations that are actually using this particular instrument. Now, from what I've seen, I don't see, this is from, it's been almost 10 years. So you might have to do some additional searching if you wanted to see if there was something a little bit, let's say within the last 5 years. I don't know how often they update this piece, but this is the original here. This is where you can get this from. And I will say that if I had something like this, I would be able to get the full text in how many minutes here. So I'm going to go and look for the instrument. So I'm going to go look for that particular article. So I can look in the search box in the library homepage. I can look at the like PubMed or another kind of database, academic search Premier. So I'm going to click on the PDF so I can go into the full text. And then as I get there it goes. I'm going to start, go to the PDF. And sorry, as I scroll here. So then it's starting to give me here some response information. It's going to give me information or the actual tests in the article. So that's just to show you that that's an example that I wish was so easy to get information. The next example that I wanted to show you was HaPI. And I'm going to go back to the databases page here to get HaPI. So here's HaPI right here. It's an Ovid for those of you who might be familiar with Ovid. And the example I'm going to use today is a different one. It's a coping health inventory for parents. Okay. So it's giving me, there's 36 citations that might have something to do with coping health inventory for parents. So if I scroll down and take a look here, you're going to see some limits here. And the primary source limit indicates the instrument was developed by the authors who cited it. It's also used to indicate that an instrument has been revised for this particular, like the cited article. Then there's also secondary sources that it doesn't include the instrument. It includes articles that describe how the instrument was used. So I'm going to click on primary source and I'm going to hit search. So it goes from 36 articles down to 5. And I believe this number 4, I think this is it. I'm pretty sure this is the original one. So as I mentioned a little while ago, that you can't always, they don't have PDFs, they don't always have the instruments in here. What's nice is you can look up by acronym, but I don't always look that way because lots of things can be under the same acronym. And I'm pretty sure this might be like a manual or a book as I look at that citation. So then I can look and see if I can maybe borrow this from somewhere else if I wanted to get access to this, or I can even look around and see if I can find this. But this is just another database that you can use that's going to give you a little bit of information about a particular test or measurement. And then the last database that I wanted to show you as an example was that mental measurements yearbook, using a different example. So I'm going to search. So I think I'm going to go with this one here, the first one. So then as you see, it's giving you information about the purpose, population, how long it takes to administer this particular survey or scale questionnaire. Also gives you, might be a little outdated here, but information on how much it's going to cost, which is very useful to make, especially if you're trying to decide if you need to, how much you want to pay. Also gives you some additional information here. Lots more. And then they give you two, usually I think I've seen it's two reviews by usually like some sort of a mental health specialist or clinician. And so they'll give you some idea, with validity and commentary on the test. So this is another place that you can take a look and see if you can get more information on a particular test. Before I move on to my next example, are there any questions so far? I just wanted to check in, if there's something that wasn't clear, you can either type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Okay, very good question. What if you don't know what you're looking for? Or yes, absolutely. Yeah, so now I'm going to get into that. Perfect segue on that. I will show you that. Any other questions? Okay, can you do a general UIC library search if you have the instrument, or do you have to go to the specific database? So, I'm trying to think if I've ever gone to the catalog. I'm going to say, I don't think I would go with the catalog because the catalog is searching in all these different places and I cannot get as specific. And so I think I would, and I'm going to show you this when I give you some ideas of how you can use some of our databases to actually search for, like on a specific topic for an instrument. Because I can double check that because I'm trying to think if you could with the limits, maybe if I have time at the end, I'll take a look in the catalog. But to me, because the catalog, it's just looking in all these different places and I don't, and another thing too is with the catalog, as I think you can see things, for example, you might see things in like iShare, which is like all 80 catalog libraries, 80 libraries throughout the state of Illinois, like academic libraries. Thing is, I don't know if it's actually going to get as deep as I would need it to, like, especially if it's something that we have a time at the end. Maybe I'll pop into our catalog and see. I don't know. Sometimes when I look at the catalog, it's good for certain things, but I would feel might be giving me too much, or it might not. Yeah, that's a good question. Any other questions? Okay, catalog is a database, right? I'm curious if there's an instruments database made specifically for instruments, maybe not, because so there are databases that have information on, like the ones that I just showed you, like that mental measurements one. There is a database that the library used to have called APA psych tests, that it had some full text instruments, not all full text instruments. And unfortunately, we discontinued it, and I will say I miss it a lot. That is an example of a database that does have some full text. I do not know off the top of my head if there's something out there that has the full text, because it gets into permissions, it gets into payments and things like that. So I don't, to my knowledge, I've never seen anything that's like, okay, I go into this one database and I get all the PDFs. There are a couple of resources that I'll talk about towards the end that might help get you in that right direction, but they're not going to make all the tests freely available. You might still have to pay for them, if that answers your question. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here, and please ask questions, asking very good questions today. So locating research instruments on a topic. There's a few different ways that you can do that. You can go through the databases index, because they might actually index particular kinds of tests or the actual tests themselves, information on those tests, or you can actually search a database to do so. And the database examples that I'm going to be doing today, the first one, and So the first, I'm listing two side by side. It's APA PsycInfo and APA Psych Articles. And this is by American Psychological Association. I tend to use PsycInfo more because this is more of your behavioral health, psychology, psychiatry piece. And with PsycInfo, it's got over 2,500 journals. It also has book chapters. It has dissertations. It has lots of things in it. But then Psych Articles is like more of a full text articles database. I think it doesn't have as wide as coverage, but both of them go back pretty far. They're both in ProQuest. The APA PsycInfo is in ProQuest. That's who we subscribe to. And then we have the other databases. ERIC is available through several different platforms. It's freely available. It is an education database. So if you're doing any research in like school populations, you could start with ERIC. That's a good place to go, like in a university setting, high school, things like that. So let's see, I'm just gonna take a look at and actually I wanted to see, would anybody be able to give me an example of like a topic or like one or two words, like something I could use that as a demo for the search? Because it works really, usually it works well in the PsycInfo work stressor. Okay, I'm going to give this one a shot. All right. Okay. Oops. Okay. All right. So, and this, I'm still getting used to them calling a PsycInfo APA PsycInfo. You could just call it PsycInfo because they really wanted to emphasize the APA piece. Okay. So I'm in PsycInfo. And what I'm going to do is instead of going straight to the search box here, I'm going to go to this look up tests and measures. And then I'm going to try and see if I can find something for work stressor. Let's see if this is going to work. Okay. So what it's doing is there's a couple different ways it's searching here. I'm doing the default, which is contains. It's actually containing the test is going to be containing the words that I'm interested in terms of like the title. I could also do begins with, that's another option. If I wanted to make sure like it started with those particular words, but I usually start with the contains piece. So then you can, so what it's doing is it giving me, and there's times when I've done this and sometimes I'll get a lot. So as it's giving me work stressor exposure, the scale, inventories, giving all sorts of things here. And I wish there was a way that I could add all these at once, but I don't think there'd be. So just give me a little bit, couple minutes here. I'm just going to go just pick a whole bunch of these. I have seen it's like it sometimes depending on the tests or measurement or so, it will give like if there's it's another language. So I'm just going to go through. Okay, I'll just do a whole bunch here. And I'm going to OR them together. I could do and if I wanted to, but or I'm going to do or because it's going to give me either ones. Hitting search. So then it's giving me these particular articles, or there might be, okay, this one is just articles. So now where this information is coming from, I'm going to click on the first one here. Because what they're telling me is that this particular resource actually used a certain scale or research instrument. So as I scroll down, so it's giving me, here it is, the work stressor scale for clinicians. So this is the one that it's using. It's also will list if there's more than one. And what's nice is with some of these, they will link back to, I think it's APA PsycNet. I think that's what it is. So I'm going to click on, I know unfortunately they didn't have one for this work stressor scale. I'm going to use this one as an example here since it gives me a URL. So when I click on that, so it's taking me psych. Oh, why did that? That's weird. Let me try this other one. Maybe something's wrong with the link because I know the one I was looking at earlier, it worked. Okay, here it is. So it's giving me, okay, so they don't sell tests. It's more information. So it just gives you a little bit of information about it. So that, I don't know if that's going to be helpful. But then you'd have to actually, okay, I have the name of the scale, and then you'd have to start doing the digging around to see if you can find the full text. So this at least because not all, like, just to give you, like, PubMed, which is the major health sciences database, does not do this. Like, you can't go into PubMed and go, oh, I want to search for a particular test, like measurement. I want to look for keywords like with names and things like that. PubMed doesn't do that. PsycInfo will do that. CINAHL will also do that too. So that's just something to be aware of. Is that this might help you. It just you just would have to do the digging just to go and look around, see if you could find that particular instrument. I'm also going to try Eric. And as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, there's several different versions of Eric. I'm going to do EBSCOhost because it looks like CINAHL. I'm more comfortable there. But I think you should be able to do something like this in all of them. So I'm going to the indexes. And then I can select in the indexes. I thought they had something here, or here it is, assessment and survey identifiers. I think that's the closest thing to what I could find. And I think the one I wanted to use was autism. Here, okay. So they gave me autism diagnostic observation scale. Add that to the search box up there. Hit search, and what it's supposed to do, I think it's supposed to give me articles that are using this. So they're actually indexing this. I'm going to go into the record itself so you can see where this is coming from, assessment and survey identifiers. So this is another way so you can see, okay, what's actually being used, but then you got to go find it, the actual test or measurement. Let me go back. Actually, I'll show you really quick in CINAHL. Oh, okay. So the question came in. I'll answer that in a few minutes. All right, bouncing around here. Just going to do here. I'm going to try to think of how I want to do this here. So I meant to show you how to get, like, if you wanted to see what's in here in terms of that information for the instruments that I showed you earlier. Or is it going to tell me there? There's a couple. I think there's one way. I could try it this way. Is it going to work? Or do you have to? Okay, it wants me to do something. So I know there's like, I always mix up which way to do it. I think it's this way. Yeah. I'll try. I think this is going to work. Yeah. So this is where that's coming from. I limited it to publication type for the particular instruments here. So there's the 254 that gives you that information. And then I'm just doing a really quick search here. Oh, I still have that on there. Let me take that off. I mean, this is really broad, but just so that you see again where this information is coming from. Oh, okay. Sorry, I picked a bad example because I don't see. Usually it'll list like how I was showing you a couple minutes ago, and usually we'll do it that way. Like they will actually list the actual name. So that's just, but you should be able to find that in there. Okay. And there's a question. Are you familiar with the FenX toolkit? I'm actually not familiar with that. I'll have to look into that. And see how that fits in. If you want to give me a little bit more information, that'd be great. You can put it in the chat box. I can look into that some more. Okay. So another, like I could also look in the subject headings. And with the subject headings, so in CINAHL, this is an example, like I can look at instrument validation. I can also look at validation studies. So that's another thing that I can use the database as subject headings. So that is another way I can do this. And then I can even do a search for a particular kind like I could even do a search, like a broader search. So this, I think I took this example from a colleague of mine. So this in PubMed, what she did was she used the subject heading, the mesh term in PubMed, surveys and questionnaires. Then she did a search for like develop that's what that TI means, or valid TI, or like reliable TI instrument, except, you can keep adding in words. So then she did a star, which is the truncation symbol. So that picks up develops, development. And then there's also like, you could do the topic, because sometimes I'll do this, I'll just do valid with the star. So a student was asking me a couple years ago, like, about like implicit bias or racism, if there was like something out there, and healthcare professionals in the emergency room. So I think what I did was I went into PsycInfo, like what you just saw a couple minutes ago when I did that. And then I gave her some ideas. Now the thing is, when you do this, like when you do the valid, it still might not be validated. They might mention it. Maybe they tried it. Maybe it wasn't validated. But that's another idea, is to do like your topic search, and you can add in like valid or like validity, reliability with that star, like see it, it's picking up the variations of that word. So that's another idea too. And this is something else that some of our databases have, is they have subject headings for instruments. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, PubMed does not index instruments. I wish they did. They do not. You can't do this. I think I've only seen a handful of instruments in PubMed as a subject, but CINAHL does it. Embase, which is another health sciences database, does this. So this is not all of them. There's at least another 30, 50 more. But if it's a more of a popular or well-known, a standard kind of a research instrument, sometimes you can actually just pick it and search that way. That's another thought. Another idea is the databases will limit or filter. You can limit or filter a particular way. Like a couple of minutes ago in CINAHL, I did like the research instrument one, so that it gave me the 250 or so actual, like, give information on those instruments. So in PubMed, which is nice, is that you can limit to a validation study. So that's another idea too. So it depends. You can either maybe try the subject headings, or look and see, like in CINAHL, it's questionnaires. They will give you articles that mention that they're using a questionnaire. It's just that they're not going to say, oh, it's validated. You might have to do a little more digging for that, or read the article, or maybe they'll say in the title. We also have a couple other places that you can go look for like tests and measurements and things like that. And the one resource is a brand new resource that was purchased, I think, for sociology. It's a communications and journalism resource. It's called Cosmic, and it's a compendium of scales and measures in communication. It gives you information on a particular test or scale. If there's anybody in the health sciences, I have seen some examples in there. So social sciences, health sciences, any discipline here, I think that might be a good place, especially if you want something with communication. Another resource is ProQuest dissertations and theses. Sometimes a student is doing a dissertation that they're incorporating a particular measurement. Maybe they're actually validating an instrument that they're creating, and they're using this for their dissertation. Now, in this database, you can't get we don't have the full text for all of them. We do have some full text of those dissertations. Then maybe you'd have to go online or request the dissertation through interlibrary loan. Sometimes they will lend those to you. Any questions before I go into for the last few minutes, just before I get, I don't know if there's anything else anybody wanted to mention, and I'll look at that website I just saw in the chat. I'll do that towards the end. If there's any other comments, questions here in the chat, I just wanted to check in. Okay. Please, keep going with the questions. Good questions, or any comments today. So in terms of other resources that are worth knowing about is there's API PsycNet. I was actually just on that website a little bit earlier when I was trying to show you an example from API PsycInfo when I was in the record, and it had some DOI links. That's going back to API PsycNet. Burroughs has they have an online database called Test Reviews that will give you some information on the tests or instruments, and you might be able to order them. Another one is TestLink that will provide you information on instruments and how to order them. And there are also times when there are subject-specific examples. The one that I have here, I think, is from Shirley Ryan Ability Lab as rehab measures, because some disciplines will have their own, like a database, or maybe they'll have something on their website that they will mention or list instruments. Maybe they will provide the full text. Sometimes they do. We also have print resources in the library that might have some information on particular tests or measurements. The first example that I have here is a directory of unpublished experimental mental measures. I think the last volume was published like 10 years ago. I don't know if they're going to come out with another one, because we do have the volumes upstairs. That will give you information on them. Another one, hopefully pronounce this correctly, Pruebas Publicadas en Español. And this is the second volume, and there's a third volume coming out later this year, that has information on tests and measurements in Spanish. Unfortunately, I don't think these two are online. I think they're just print resources. So if you want to take a look at them, you would have to come in. And then in terms of looking for specific, sometimes certain subjects, they will have books, tests, and measurements on particular they'll have their own like information or books that are out there. So Asher's, this is one that is an index. This has been out for a while, like as an example, through our catalog. And then this Measuring Health one, we actually do have this as an ebook and in print. They will either give you information on tests for a particular subject, or they will actually have the actual instruments in them. So it's all going to depend on the book, but these are just some examples out there. So what about Google Scholar? Good old Google Scholar. Google Scholar is useful. I remember years ago, I had to go help somebody. They came in and I actually found, I was amazed, I found the actual, what they wanted in like some public, it was from something in the Netherlands. I couldn't believe I found it. Like they had it in both Dutch and English, and I found the actual, what they were interested in. I was amazed I found it. There's times when it is useful. But with Google Scholar, I can't go, oh, I want an article as a questionnaire. I want an article that is a research instrument. I can't do that. You can try to look and use it if you wanted to see if you can find the full text, which is what I did with that example that I just mentioned. You can also see if an article like based on a research instrument has been cited. If they used it, you can see who cited it. That's helpful. And another trick is you can use Google, Bing, or another search engine, and you can use the search image. You can actually, let's say you put in the tests in the search box, go to the images section, and then they will give you screenshots. They might look in the PDF, they might look on a website or somewhere else, and they will actually give you the instrument. So that is something else too. That's another trick that I saw several years ago in a library list. I was like, oh, that's a good idea. That's really good. And that has helped me a few times over the years. So in terms of actually purchasing the tests, so a couple of those resources that I showed you, the ETS was one of them. You can purchase them to a test publisher's website because the publisher holds the copyright to the tests that they distribute. They maintain the manuals and the scoring keys. They also might have separate policies for an individual if you're using this on your own versus like a particular organization is using it. And you also may be required to complete a test purchaser qualifications form that allows a publisher to determine if the purchaser is qualified and competent to administer and interpret the test. You can also get permission. So with commercially published instruments and all those, in terms of figuring it out, that always gets tricky because there are some instruments they will flat out say, yes, you may use it. Yes, you're good. Just let us know that you're going to use this. So in terms of trying to figure that out, who do you contact to get it? Especially if you find the citation, but you can't actually get the test. Like it's not available. You could get it somewhere. So you could try contacting that particular person, like going into the contact information article. You could try, I actually had to do this for an article last year. There was one, I found the original, but I couldn't get the actual test or measurement. I looked on, I contacted a colleague at, it was University of North Carolina, and they actually had information on their website, on the, I think it was the College of Nursing's website for this, they were like, contact this particular person. So you could try contacting an individual, maybe try contacting the college or department they were affiliated with. Um, you might also have to contact the publisher, or that's another thing, because but that gets tricky because some of these tests and scales have been around for years. Sometimes you're lucky enough to find a website that has information on it. But it's always good, ask for permission to use so that you can use it. Because they might say, oh, can you send me the final peer reviewed or drafted manuscript or something like that. They might ask to do that. You can even try APA, American Psychological Association. They might get you in the right direction. They don't store, I don't think they have instruments there, but they might be able to help you too. And this is in terms of further reading. The first resource, this is a really good resource. It's a book we have, and I highly recommend it. It does a really nice job explaining, like in terms of selecting research instruments. It's very easy to understand, very helpful, especially for if we have faculty who are working with students. I highly recommend this. Some of the information I got today is from the APA, because they have some suggestions about how to find psychological tests. And then if you wanted to get more information about doing surveys and all those kinds of things, we have a database called Sage Research Methods. And what that does is it gives you information. It has books, it has videos, information on doing quantitative research. And they will have some books about survey research or instruments. And if you wanted to actually dive into that more, like getting that background information on that, we have Sage Research Methods. Okay, so I'm going to just check in here and see if there's any questions. Okay.